Cool. Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Labyrinth, to all our labyrinthers. Have here Charlie here, and we have
Tizzle, happy Friday, y'all. Venus Day.
and we'd like to introduce our guest today, who's also one of Cosmic Labyrinthers, one of the founders as well. His name is Mick here. So welcome, Mick, joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bam.
So we'll start with kind of like our, Cosmic Labyrinth mission statement. So Mick, if you want to go ahead and.
Yes, the cosmic portals have opened and we are awakening to a rehumanizing cosmic consciousness where everyone can discover their cosmic powers. This is an important time where we learn to build and experience heart-centered technology that connects us to the natural world and our inner selves. Cosmic Labyrinth is a multi-dimensional and ever-evolving experience where children and inner children are empowered to live with curiosity and cosmic consciousness. We are developers, artists, healers, scientists, building on an intervolutionary gaming platform that is a nexus of knowledge about ancient cultures, mystic wisdom, and self-care. We currently curate educational play shops online and in person that reconnect us to the wisdom of the elements and the science and spirituality inherent in them.
Yes, thank you. So we're excited to also be able to share two of our events that we had already. And Mick Mick and actually Miss Tizzle has been there for both of them too. So we can kind of share that experience and why we're doing it, and the goal of these future events, and what we're trying to do with these like on location play shops.
Facts.
Cool.
So such an honor, and like really excited for what we're building and how it continues to grow. And I'm really excited that we had an opportunity to do this before we all go back to school. Because I know once we get back into the groove of school, it's going to be like,
Well, it'll be good actually for you guys to be able to share some of the things that you're experiencing in school too, and we'll be also on a rhythm where like we started this before school. Yeah. And Mick, you're also a teacher right now too, right? You're during the summer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, teacher in many different areas. But I during the summer I was teaching at UCLA. I've been doing that for like 8 years. The Art Sci Center has a program called the Sci-Art Summer Institute, and that's like a huge highlight for me every year to teach, because it's like a select group of high school students that are already interested in this intersection between art and science, but don't know that there's a whole world and field around it, right? And it kind of fuels the teaching that I do at the all-girls school in Pasadena. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we'll definitely gonna go back to that, but I just wanted to real quick let us look at the astrological transits and alignment. And we're also going to adjust it to actually do it for the next coming 2 weeks, because right now we're doing our shows about every 2 weeks. It's kind of a good way to kind of like a weather report, right? We're seeing how today's weather is, but then looking forward to the next 2 weeks, because our conversation is kind of manifesting, and our thoughts are manifesting throughout the 2 weeks. So it's a good idea to help us understand what is it that we're looking into. So, our conversation can be also a little bit directed with the collective energies.
Yes. Powerful.
So we are still in Leo. Right here. So it's 12 o'clock here in Houston, 10 o'clock over in the Pacific Coast.
Wow.
So we still have the conjunction in Taurus here going on.
Yes.
The Leo energies getting Venus is coming into Leo.
Wow.
Still got the retrograde here in Pisces, and the moon has just conjunct actually full moon today, or
yesterday, y'all.
Yesterday.
Full moon in Aquarius, the last super moon of the year. All about freedom, all about authenticity, all about really like stop playing yourself and be honest about the things that you really want to bring to your world and your light and your life. As you know, Aquarius, the innovator, the anomaly. And with this full moon happening, just really encouraging us all to, like, what are we being disciplined in? Like, what are the things that we really need to show up for and do the work in and not try to bypass? Like, how can you really put your mark in the community? How can you really like shine the light that you're supposed to, as opposed to just like, oh no, this isn't who I am, I want to hide, right? I mean, it was so bright last night. It was super powerful, so powerful.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's also just past Saturn that was retrograding in Aquarius. And that's been a very big theme in today's collective life, right? A lot of us are experiencing this. Our structure is changing to more an Aquarius based energy, where Capricorn, instead of being that logical, rooted, and climbing mountains to find their fulfillment, they're moving to more of a individual place where everyone is a great being that is here to share their information. And so we've kind of gone from, like, the old days of what we talk about pyramid schemes, right? Where you have the top gets everything and everybody in the bottom, right? And that's the mountain that this goat would climb on, right? This is, to me, the Capricorn energy. Why skyscrapers are these giant towers that we're climbing during the days of success of Capricorn. And today now, with the energy of Aquarius coming in, it's still ruled by the original ruler of Saturn, modern day Uranus, but it was always ruled by Saturn before. So Saturn in Capricorn was where it's most comfortable, but Saturn in Aquarius is almost kind of where it's evolving structure to a place where, instead of a pyramid scheme, can we maybe look at it like a round table, right? And this is to us the age of, like, the Knights of the Round Table, right?
Yes.
Where there's everybody's an equal, and everybody as an individual is closer to being part of the greater puzzle. And so it's great that the moon, our emotions kind of went through that past Saturn in Aquarius, and we still have here, I guess, squaring us is the Taurus energy.
Yes. And the North Node, y'all. It's squaring the North Node. So North Node is about, like, what is it you're supposed to be doing right now that you aren't necessarily familiar with or comfortable with or have knowledge about, but like you have a hearkening to it. South Node is like what you've been doing for lifetimes, what comes super easy to you, what just flows. And now it's like, what are you really supposed to be stepping into? And something that I would encourage you to, like, think about or reflect on, what were you doing back in February during the new moon in Aquarius? Because the seeds you planted in February during the new moon in Aquarius is helping to manifest what just occurred with this full moon and will be happening. Like, the full moon energy is going to be happening like the shadow until like the 14th or 15th. So just really give yourself an opportunity to, like, full picture, right? Like, where was I? Where am I? And then build off of that.
Yeah, and it's really important. I mean, what Tizzle was saying about cycles, it's really important to understand astrology is actually fundamentally cycles repeating over and over again, so that in the greater game of life, what we're going through at certain times can be like our natural way of reviewing our life, so that we can understand the greater lesson behind it, and then be able to do something better, right? Or more advanced, right? Because it's almost like the challenges that we experience is really to test us to see whether or not we can take that information experience to a greater experience, to a higher space, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about, the cosmic labyrinth and education in general, right? Well, we're rebuilding the foundation blocks so that eventually we can have very complicated, complex conversations. But today it's hard to have a conversation when people don't even know how to grow food, understand what the earth is. And so this very much Taurian conjunction to me is kind of like, and we ourselves have been experiencing this with events of trying to do soil regeneration, trying to understand how to grow food, to understand what the soil does to really allow us to grow our food, right?
Yeah.
And so this very strong North Node, Uranus, and Mars. So as a masculine, and I'm like picking up a shovel, like that's just naturally how I feel. And so it's very important that to see that if we are connecting to the earth, it's part of this transit where we're experiencing.
And two, I just learned about the part of fortune. So the little symbol that looks like the X from X-Men, right? It's such a powerful symbol. And the fact that it's in the 7th house, right? And just it's in Taurus. So it's really encouraging you to like, what's your security? What's your stability? Like, where are your finances? And then if you look below, Jupiter is in Aries and Chiron is in Aries. All things that deal with like I am, and it's in the 6th house. So it's like, how's your health? Like, what is it that you need to organize? What is it that you need to purge? Because once you do all of those things, and then like your flow into the 7th house will be much lighter. Like you won't be carrying that baggage with you, because as you excavate and do the work right now, it'll allow that flow into the 7th house to be that much richer and lighter and more abundant.
Yeah, and the 7th house of relationship, right? This is where we connect with each other. And so you don't come to people with baggage, right? And so this idea, even metaphorically, ideally, right? Unless you're one of those people who are like, okay, well, let's go through that baggage you brought, that'd be a great Virgo friend, right? And so what we'll do now is actually, if you guys have never seen this, it's really important to understand too, like a lot of times, just like a wave versus a wave versus a particle, right? Right now we're looking at transit as a particle. It's within the next 30 minutes, this transit's gonna be there. That's it. It's a what's it called? A snapshot of today's transit. And what we'll do is we'll actually walk through the next 12 days and see how the next 12 days will actually look for us. And that's closer to what quantum mechanics talks about between the particle versus the wave function, right? And so the particle is a snapshot in time that we wanted to separate, but life runs more like a movie. Our life is not a JPEG, life is more like a movie. So life is more of a wave. And so by looking at the transit in the next 2 weeks, we can imagine our lives being the next 2 weeks rather than, in this 12 o'clock, in this next hour, this is what the energy are like. So I'm just stepping through them one day at a time, and you guys can see things are moving all counterclockwise on the wheel. Let me know if you see any, so gosh. Here, the moon, Jupiter, and Chiron. Snuggles right between Chiron and Jupiter here, almost in Aries, right? So August 15th, right? So on Monday, August 15th, maybe pay attention to your emotions, and maybe, where we're speaking our truth. And, to me, Aries is a lot of times like the guard dog next to like your private space, your personal space, right? We talk a lot about this when people like get into your personal space. You're like, hey, you're a little too close to me. So Aries to me is like when a lot of people, their personal boundaries are being stepped on. That's when like the little chihuahua, wah, 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 barks, and you're like, Aries has started to like, start a fight because, it's telling you you're too close. And so the moon is kind of snuggling right between there, kind of saying, hey, where are you letting people's personal space or your personal space being encroached, right? Because that's really important in the 6th house of health here too. So there's a lot going on here on Monday. So after the weekend, maybe pay attention to where your emotions are at. Noted. Let me know if you see anything else. And then the moon, I guess, joins up on this crazy Taurian conjunction.
Oh my
right
gosh.
about Thursday of next week.
This is
And you can see
real.
this will be like a quarter moon, right? Because the moon has made
Yeah.
a quarter or 75 of the way there.
Yes.
So next week, Mondays and Thursday, pay attention. It's specifically the emotional space. And this is where I think a lot of people don't understand that the moon's movement in the 12 houses kind of shows up with people who have strong water and emotional connection. Their emotions will ride the same
Mm.
wave as the moon. And so this is why like some of us call those who are very moon connected, bipolar, right? In the Western culture, we like to see things as wrong, not as right. So whenever it
Yes.
was working wrong, we'll call it a name, right? So, bipolar is really the idea that the moon is flowing through these 12 signs and experiencing really the breadth of emotions.
I feel this. Oh, and Neptune in Pisces. Neptune's going to be in Pisces, so it's going to be dignified, and it's in the 5th house. So it's like really tapping into that heart space and being true and not like deluded or too flowy. Like really, I take note of that. Sorry, it's just Pisces sun here. Like, ooh, Leo rising. I
You
felt
felt
that.
it in so many, yeah, yeah.
Okay, what that's what is that? The 18th Thursday. Okay, Jupiter's day. Right on.
Yeah, yeah. So 18th and then 12, 14. So a few more days later. So really the moon is making herself moving around the chart. And
Oh
then
wow.
here she goes into Leo 26. So
Oh, and Virgo. Happy
four,
Virgo season.
yeah, 2 weeks. Oh yeah, and enters Virgo. So the moon will make herself known, a lot more of that. So the moon has kind of made her circle around, it's coming back now to the sun. So we kind of imagine it's the remarriage, right? When she leaves is when you're going to a divorce between the moon and the sun. But when she comes back is when like she's falling in love and they both fall in love again. And so right before the moon enters Virgo, right, she's got to be dignified. It's like that moon energy or your emotion has to take center stage. It has to be like what you consider the highest priority in your life. Because if you're not paying attention to your emotion, you don't realize how your life is being directed by this subconscious pattern of the moon. So right here, it feels very dignified in this space to be like, queen or king of our emotions. Right before, I think it's like Virgo kicks in. It's like time to kind of organize yourself now that you know what your emotions are. You feel happy about yourself. It's like the Virgo time, which I love, is the harvest. Reward yourself for the things that we've done, right? Like, have you been putting in the work? Because right when your emotions are very happy and excited, that's when you kind of like, you've beaten the 12 zodiac signs of the moon cycle. So now, like, what have you learned? So kind of feel
And
like
it's in the
right.
10th house. It's in the 10th house, y'all. So it's like,
Yeah.
don't play. Don't play around. Like you're at the goat, you're in the goat's house.
It
Like
goes
you're in the
south.
sea goat territory. So you gotta really step up. Like you cannot half step. You gotta show up. Wow, that's gonna be intense.
And
Virgo, sun, and the
and
10th
then Mars
house.
will have moved into Gemini, so it will release some of that stubborn Mars energy or stubborn Mars energy with Taurus, right? Where we're
Yeah.
like maybe a little stubborn about things. Now it'll be a little bit more of a lighthearted, and we'll think about new ideas, and we'll get new ideas to think about our problems rather than before just like brute forcing it. Like it doesn't work, we'll just use more power to break it down.
We're
we'll,
gonna plow through this.
exactly, yes, get the biggest bulls to go right through the wall.
Oh man. I've never
uh,
looked at it like this before. I've never gone like day by day and seen the cycle move. This is cool.
and I think it's easier for me to process things that way, like just because like when I do it, a lot of people think that like astrologists, at least I'm not necessarily a full-on astrologist, but they check every day, and for me it was really hard because after a week it felt like
Everything's different.
well, or similar, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of energies don't move. And if you guys notice, like really the moon is what's bouncing around all these crazy conjunctions, right? She goes, oh, what you guys doing over here? Oh, it's crazy here. I'm moving on. Oh, what you guys going in here? Like, yeah, this is fun. Yeah. You know?
The
And-
moon moves. Ooh, I like the
Right.
etymology root there.
Exactly. And so this is what we can go back even to, we've talked about this with different calendar cycles, right? The lunar calendar is a 28-year moon calendar, but 13-month calendar. And that could be, you know, closer to an astrological calendar that matches the planetary alignment. Because, you know, with the Gregorian, we have to adjust things every leap year. You know, that means that we're not running a very, you know, astrologically parallel clock. So Mick, would you like to also add in anything, as you know, if you see anything on your end for astrology?
Water wizard.
Yes, let the Scorpio speak. See anything
Well,
that we don't see?
I mean, okay, so I mean, my approach to astrology, I've grown up with astrology, is very much a kind of mystics approach. So I oftentimes I kind of like mush it all together and like just kind of feel it, you know. I don't usually dissect anything. So I'm really enjoying hearing you guys like kind of parse out all the pieces, right? Because yeah, I mean, definitely the moon is a big influence on my life, and just seeing that movement and feeling the moon in the last few days, that intensity, that wave of energy and
Yeah.
activity that comes with it, right? Yeah, and also the I think it gives you the kind of the courage to push through things. So I'm like, it gives you that energy and courage to be like, okay, I'm gonna take on this big thing that has been waiting for maybe a couple of weeks, right? Just gonna do it, right? Yeah.
It also shows kind of like some emotions are transient, right? They don't have to stick around. And so, I mean, it depends if you're really depressed for something. But like in general, like your emotions are fleeting sometimes. So it's, you know, so we talk about this all the time, like be in the moment to appreciate when you are in a certain emotional glee or sadness, that you're in that moment to experience it, because it's going to be very fleeting, because the moon will, you know, 2 days later move on.
Please experience it, because if you don't, I feel like when we don't allow ourselves to experience these emotions that rise, right? They ebb and flow, like with the cycles. And when we don't allow ourselves to feel, it gets trapped somatically in our body. And then you start having like all these things. And then if you continually do it as each cycle builds, then it's like you're building that energy within your body. So when you allow yourself to feel it, it's like releasing it, right? I mean, gosh, maybe this is too dark to say, but whatever, I'm gonna say it. It's like when you see an animal get hit and it doesn't like die, what's the first thing it does after it gets hit? What does it do?
Cringes.
Do any of you know?
Screams.
It does make a noise, but like it shakes.
Shakes, yeah.
Shakes immediately. It's like, oh, get that shit off, right? And that's something that we should be doing. It's like, whoa, that just happened, but like, let me release it at the same time. Like, acknowledge that it happened, but then do the work to like make sure it's not like sticking anywhere.
Yeah, it's a very powerful technique we use in Qigong. And so even with acupuncture as well, one of the techniques we do is they call it trembling horse, right? Yeah, you basically tremble and shake off whatever could be superficial. You know that move in the Matrix where like he's like ready, he like got dust, he's all like he like shakes it off and the dust comes out.
Oh,
like,
yes.
around too. Yeah. Yeah, so imagine how the dust is like, you know, quantum negative energy, right? Like bad thoughts, negative thoughts, things that we, you know, are gooey and gross. And so a lot of times, even when we say something negative, right, or to ourselves, we're like, oh, I don't look good, very good. And so like that's spitting negative energy
Right.
sticks to your auric field. And so in general, in Qigong, what happened is when you imagine this like trembling horse, you're imagining shaking off this dense energy that comes off of you. So it goes back to this metaphor of like, when we say, you need to feel lighter, you need to empty yourself, you need to release all this baggage that we wear, metaphorically speaking, but actually in physical terms, it's called stagnation. And in Chinese medicine, there's a proverb that's like repeated constantly: where there is stagnation, there is pain. If you remove the stagnation, there is no pain. It's that simple. Meaning that anytime that our energy, our flow, our chi, so in our body, you can call it chi as electricity, biomechanical electricity. You can call it your lymphatic system, which is your water system. And then you can call it your cardiocircular system. All of it, right? All moving all the time. So when you have stagnation, and we see it in a lot of joints, right? Because the joint's supposed to be straight, but you bend it here, the flow breaks and it has to do a 90-degree, right? So sometimes flow becomes stagnated here, right? Even, and so shoulders tend to be where we tend to have a lot of stagnation because, right, we're all on that computer, stuck in our little, angles. And so we create stagnation because we're actually tightening our muscles and holding it. Right. And so going back to how people say emotions are stored in your body, actually, it's more specifically your thoughts of the emotion and trauma is stored in your myofascial layer, which is water crystals. And so no one talks about this, but the myofascial layer around your muscles is a crystalline water crystal sheath. That sheath, I believe, is what connects to your auric body, your quantum field. And so when you think about that, when that gets stuck, then energy can't flow through, right? And so you get stagnation or you get pain, And so now you've heard of, some people, all of us in the healing field heard of emotional freedom tapping technique, right?
EFT.
EFT, right? And so you got pain here and you tap it, an emotion gets released. So this is where massage therapy, and acupuncture, opening up meridians, is the same concept. When we have an emotion trauma, the trauma gets registered in this invisible auric field. That auric field basically keeps this energy for long enough that it starts to seep into our body. And so in our body, it will then create stagnation in the muscles, and that's where now, when people even have trauma, if you remove the trauma from their consciousness, sometimes a muscle will actually release. Right.
This is why drinking water is important too, because if it's a water crystalline sheath, water helps to cleanse and purify. So if you're not really, if you don't have a really good water intake, how are you able to allow yourselves to release those thoughts and energy that's being stored in that mycelial sheath? Whoa.
And so we talk about water actually carrying memories, right? So imagine that water is carrying the memory of the emotion. So why, after a lot of massages, we usually give water, right? And they say drink a lot of water after massage. Why? Because we technically moved energy in your body so much that you've turned a dam into a flowing river. But if you don't add any more water, you're just diluting.
Get stuck again.
Exactly. So adding more water, which is fresh thoughts and ideas, to clear the negative thought that you just moved around so that it flushes, right? And this is why it's important to understand how our waste is developed in our body. So that's the poop and pee, right? And this is something we joke around in our own community because we know how important poop is, right? But pee is also urination, right? Water metabolism, and then solid metabolism, right? Is two ways that we actually remove things that our body no longer needs, right? And we hear in metaphysics, talk all the time, let go what you don't need. How does your body does that? Because if we talk about it in our minds, it's not thinking about it, which is obviously really difficult. But sometimes it's in our bodies, right? and or even in our mind. So we'll repeat the trauma over and over again, and our body will stay stuck. That's why we have chronic trauma. So this is kind of how like it's important to understand the mind, body, spirit as actually a trinity to your whole experience. And that's why I love astrology is more the spiritual stuff that remind us that we're all in a very like heavy push through challenges time right now. That means we're all going to run into stagnation, right? Because how many of us have dealt with challenges in the 3 weeks that has been way more intense than anything, which is why I see a lot more of my patients coming in with like, oh, Charlie, you got shoulder pain. I'm releasing that, reading the astrology going, oh, it's time for stagnation right about now.
So real. My knees have
Yeah.
been like, but I haven't been drinking my water. So like, it makes so much sense why I'm feeling that stagnation like this. Thank you. I appreciate you.
And if you match then the 4 elements again, right? If you're a water based, so like all you too, Mick, right? You're a Scorpio sun,
Yeah.
And Cancer moon, but you have a Taurus rising. That Taurus rising is why you love touching the dirt and soil, but you naturally are a water based element, right? And so it's important.
I'm a muddy guy.
Yes, a muddy guy. Yes, but mud is where all the growth happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's
makes so much
important
sense.
to understand, how to support that, right? So if you are a water sign, actually drinking the best waters and having the best type of water is super important for your health. Actually, I do believe rising is more in line with the body constitution, but then your personality is what you're going to use your body for, right? So it's almost like if you're a sun sign who's meant to do physical work like a fire sign, but you have like a body for like, a person who's just sitting on the computer, it's not connecting. You need to have like your body that can handle this fire that needs this physical or this challenge in life, right? And that's why like you'll notice, we say young or fiery energy are people who then use up a lot of water and they need to support their water. But what happens is people who are water like Pisces, they will overdo their water and end up getting edema and end up having a lot of water weight. So those are the things that we watch out for is how does the element that you're supposed to also be using all the time have deficiency or excess problems, which is what we see in astrology when we have the ruler go into the exalted space versus I don't know what's opposite exalted, detriment. Yeah, it's like detriment. That's like excess and deficiency.
This is resonating so deep right now.
So it's really just the cycles of our body and the movement of our body.
Thank you. I feel like I just had a session. Like
So speaking of which, this kind of great segue to really go into sharing our story with Mick. And Mick is a great labyrinther with us. He's been here since the beginning. And Mick, Mick's got a great flow, like going back to Muddy, right? He is both a scientist and an artist, right? He's played around with the beauty of taking what we see in like the sciences, but like turning into art, which is something that's really beautiful, right? Because we talk about how if art saves the world, we still need to know right? Even in art, you need to know the basics of squares and circles. So where Mick is like, I know the science, but make science art, that's beautiful to me. So I'm excited to share Mick's great talent with everybody.
And it's your background.
Yes.
Fibonacci, and then there's like squares, like you just described what his background is.
Yeah, Mick, would you describe your background to help everybody understand?
Yeah, sure. We all have actually kind of matching backgrounds from different layers. It kind of connects to I think all of our practice in some way, but I like to say my practices goes from the macrocosmic to the mesocosmic to the microcosmic, right? So we all have, I would say, like Charlie, you've got like the kind of macrocosmic out in outer space, right? And then like Tizzle, you've got kind of like what's going on the planet, the electromagnetic field in the background, and my background is the microcosm. It's the microbes from a microbial theater workshop that I ran with a collaborator in 2019 in Toronto, and we had the participants go out and create different petri dishes of different colors, and then create poems and theatrical performances based on what grew on the petri dishes, right? So really thinking about how all these beings that are part of us, inside of us and outside of us, and in the environment, are kind of like this common denominator of life that communicate between us and our cat. Even the cat just walked by at the right moment, right? Between our domestic animals and the plants in our home and around our home, and the soil in and out around our home, and the air as well. So yeah, it's been a long journey, kind of looking at the magic of microbes for me.
You're
sharing
throwing Petri parties.
Yeah, petri parties. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it kind of looks like a Rastafarian like microbe flag too.
It's so good. It's so good.
Like once in a lifetime concert here at this Petri where we'll grow mold and see what kind of party we can get with mold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a great thing too, like mold, right? A lot of people think mold is bad, but actually mold we use actually in science. It's what is it called? Penicillin, right? So
Yeah,
we've turned
penicillin.
mold into penicillin. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting story from, like, I guess during, I think it was World War II, or was it World War I? One of them, they actually like were using cantaloupes to grow the mold that produced penicillin, just like storehouses full of cantaloupes. That was their petri dish, because it grows really well on cantaloupes. So just like imagine all these cantaloupes growing mold on them. They just scraping off the mold and like putting it in little containers and shipping it off to the troops. Crazy, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you for that historical fun fact. I never knew.
Only here in the Cosmic Labyrinth.
For real. So many gems today. I'm just like,
I love it.
Yeah.
You definitely have so you have like two types of different molds that grew on the back on the.
One is a mold and one is a microbe. And I didn't identify them. It wasn't like, we weren't going into the taxonomy so much in the workshop, and more as like free associating. But I believe one is like an actinomycetes, which is kind of like a mold, but it's a bacteria that kind of grows. It's a filamentous bacteria that grows in the soil, and is also provides different kinds of antibiotics. I mean, the whole thing of antibiotics is that, in fact, many of our biotechnologies, they all come from microbes of some sort, right? So they're the true inventors of biotechnologies. And so, like, yeah, when you talk about antibiotics, and many different types of antibiotics are coming out of the soil at all times, because they're trying to like kind of carve out their niches. Like, okay, this is my area, so I'm going to release this mild toxin to make sure that.
Microbores.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there's so many good like shows we can do on like the microbe world, right? You know,
Yeah.
looking at this design, it looks like we're looking at topography of geography, right? You know, on the green slide here, like these guys, it could look like a rainforest, or like some kind of really interesting water pattern or swamp pattern.
Yeah.
kale.
Kale, right? Yeah, exactly. Free associate.
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and then the
fascinating.
really fuzzy one with a kind of like more gray area that's definitely some kind of mold.
Yeah, we've all seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 So make like share with us also some of your experience in education. You know, this is you know what we're trying to do is really heavy based on education, but like what were some of the greatest things that like why you care about education so much, and maybe then we'll talk about like some of the challenges that you experience in education.
Yeah. So education has become more and more a big part of my life, and I would say that like it really it began, I would say, as a calling when I went through the UCLA Art Science Center, kind of started teaching that course in the summers, the SciArt Summer Institute that I mentioned earlier, and really was like inspired by the fact that, to me, it's not about like imparting knowledge, but actually creating the conditions for ideas to grow and be shared, right? So, and I think that that's one thing that's oftentimes kind of forgotten or missed in education in this country and in many other countries, the kind of industrialized model of education where you have like a set of standardized ideas that have to be transmitted to the young ones. Whereas in fact, it's actually oftentimes the teacher is there just to create a space, and create like a catalyze these this movement of ideas, kind of like you're saying, Charlie, like to stop stagnation, to create flow, and then magical things happen, right? So then the teacher is learning just as much from the students as the students are learning from the teacher, and you're creating these clusters and finding out like which groups of people are gravitating to each other. And if you like were to look at their astrology, you would find out probably some interesting like relationships between these clusters of people that form in the classrooms that that feed these ideas, right? These new ideas, or help them absorb ancient ideas too. I mean, that's one thing that I like to think about, is that it's not about a necessarily advancement always. It's to me it's about kind of this ebb and flow of digging into all the ancient histories that are within our DNA already, right? But like having little kind of sparks to wake it up, and then figure out what new iterations want to be made within the kind of circumstances of the world that we are living in now, right? So, and with Cosmic Labyrinth, right, we're talking about how like we're all living in this world where a lot of us are addicted to technology, right? There's some interesting documentaries that are out already about like how technology has kind of captured us, right? It's the great magician of our time, right? So it's like how do we harness that and use it as a device to allow people to actually get out of the matrix at the same time, you know? So it's like getting into it in order to find access portals, and then like creating reward pathways to say we're leaving it, you know, like if you're able to leave it and help your community, and create like these kind of think tanks with people, or heartstorm moments with people without the devices, then you're really doing the alchemy that needs to be done, right? The work with the internet that's in nature, that's been in nature for millions of years, right? Billions of years. So yeah.
In
I
this
kind of rambled.
world, but not of it. No, you were so like eloquent and poetic. Like you described teaching at its peak in such a beautiful way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Let our audience know.
So what are some of the topics that you also covered in your classes? Like, what are some things that you're teaching and experiencing with your students?
Yeah, so I mean, at the girls' school where I teach, I'm a STEAM coordinator, STEAM studio coordinator. So there we're looking at or using kind of technology to make things like using 3D printers and laser cutters and all that, and but using kind of like different strategies, like design thinking strategies, to solve problems. And I mean, I'm kind of like adopting some of these strategies of like design thinking is kind of like you look at empathy, you kind of create a way of empathizing with somebody, and then you kind of try to understand what problems might need to be solved in that situation. And then you kind of brainstorm, figure out what were all kind of cool ideas that you come up with solving that problem, then you create a prototype. And that's really fun to see the iterations of, right, the cycles of that. And then in kind of more my personal style of teaching, which isn't necessarily always what I teach there, is really looking at like observation first, and using your senses, going out. I call it eco-sensing. So going out into even your own home, considering your home as an ecology or the space around your home, or to a park, and use your senses. Really engage all those senses. Take notes, draw, and absorb, and then kind of create a portrait using those, whatever with whatever media you want, and then if you keep on staying with that, you start also realizing things that you might be able to do in service of that area, right? So that's kind of like a baseline for a lot of the teaching that I do.
Yeah.
And then looking at microbes and microscopy, and using that as a kind of creative catalyst for thinking about the world from the perspective of other organisms, starting with the microbial. So it's like, there's this term by Jakob van Uxküll, which is Umwelt. So basically, it's like it's a German term. It means like the world within and around an organism. So it's like a lot of those kind of German words are also Native American words. They have the kind of like poetic, multi-layered meaning, so it's like Umwelt, like, yeah. And so it's kind of like cool to think about like what informs an organism, and how it perceives the world. So like the senses that organism has, or kind of like understanding like microbes maybe can't see, but they can sense vibration and chemical, and so what's that communication that's happening at that level, right? I'm imagining that.
Yeah.
So yeah, to expand our own sense of consciousness, right? So.
And what's great, I mean, the thing you're describing almost kind of like being a scientist, right? When you go out and play with the world and be able to observe the world that way too, because that's going back to when people say like, be in the now moment. Some people are like, that's like cliche now. Like no one's got like a quest list of what it means to be in the now. But actually, saying exactly what you said, being in the now would be using your five senses. Like, what are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you sensing? And this is kind of matches, Tiza, when you were going through your experience with drawing, right? That you asked everybody to draw what they were experiencing, not visually or able to draw it, but it's like, what are you sensing? What are you smelling? And it went back to that our body is picking up all these things. Our body is a great device or a vehicle for input, but like we're so used to, I guess, being just on our phone, right? Like we forget all the other senses that we have. So that's really
and I would extend to say that the five senses is kind of like a limited scope still, right? It's probably more like 21 or more. And there's
Can you talk about the other ones besides the five?
Yes.
I want to know. What? Here on Cosmic Labyrinth, we're learning about more than the five senses.
Yes, there's so much more. Have you heard of something called common sense?
Common sense, right?
Charlie, I love you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Wait, no, okay, but seriously, like I am curious, because when you were talking about the eco sensing, like Charlie just talked about, I was thinking of that moment when we were in the park, and it's like, yo, what do you hear? Draw that. And then you said eco sensing a portrait. Yes, I'm teaching that in my methods and materials. I'm gonna reach out to you as like having a guest speaker. I don't know how it's gonna work, but it's gonna happen. Okay. But how do you explain to people, and how do you get people to buy in? I mean, yes, Charlie just talked about, we also have common sense. So like, yes, the sixth sense, right? M. Night Shyamalan. But like, what are the what are the other 15 that we could really integrate and share with people so they get a greater like well-roundedness and connection with their environment?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Charlie was mentioning with the moon too, right? Some people are very connected to the moon cycles. You could even consider that a sense, right? I think like cosmic sense could be considered a sense, right? I mean, like, I think that it's also this question of like the Western tendency to want to label every single thing, and like kind of, like recently I read that there was a new muscle discovered, or whatever, like whatever that means, in the jaw. It was like, okay, or new organ. I think they said it was like a new organ, but it's like, is it really new, or just that you've labeled it now, right? So it's kind of like, I think that's it. Like I think you could walk down the street and ask a bunch of people what they're actually sensing at that given moment, and you discover new senses. Right? and that's kind of like between the three of us, we probably have different array of senses developed.
Yeah.
But some of the ones that have been kind of like labeled are like thermoception, like the ability to sense, temperature. That's a sense, or
Vibrations. Some people can
vibration,
sense
pain.
vibration. Yeah.
Sensing pain is considered to be another sense.
But
To
also
sense,
being able to see colors, right? Or seeing
yeah,
sound, right? And so to us, like, we don't think
synesthesia.
that's normal because we have not
Mhm.
normalized that we could see sound. But someone who could see sound, that's an input device that we don't experience. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of like going back to that idea of like the umwelt. Like it's not just different species, it's different. Every individual has a different kind of worldview based on what they've been exposed to. And so that's kind of like the point of a lot of these workshops too, is to think like, or play shops, is to imagine like how can you extend that field. But let's see, some other ones are like uh yeah, I mean, there are a lot of them are like kind of breaking down the senses of the
More
of touch.
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, like, so there's also the ability to sense kind of like magnetic fields, which is kind of up for debate, but there are people that also implant like magnets into their body to sense magnetic fields. So there's like this whole kind of world of cyborgs and cybernetics
There's also this
that
guy
hits that.
who was blind and he would
Yeah.
actually do clicking sound and create his own echolocation, and so
Yes, I know that.
we
Okay.
didn't label that until we understood that certain animals were doing that, right? But yet that's still a sense that that person developed, right? And so if anything, it goes back to this Capricorn versus Aquarius to me, right? Capricorn, top down. We tell you what senses you have because we know what's in your body, right? And it's funny too because in medical field today, right? In the medical field, yet it's funny when we talk to gynecologists, they're all dudes, right? You're like, you guys know you guys don't have the physiological system to actually be learning about gynecology, right? Makes
Funny.
me wonder why are not women in this field because it's technically their body. It's like someone who fixes boats and now is fixing cars, right? And goes, why are you fixing cars? Well, I guess learning how to fix cars is better than learning how to fix boats. What? No, I mean
Hilarious.
it's just so funny. So it's really interesting that I think today where unless it's labeled it doesn't exist. Actually now what's really happening is we're seeing that rediscovery of things that were always there.
Yes.
Right, but
Yes.
really not labeled. I mean, acupuncture, it's not like we discovered it everybody, like we've been doing it for 12,000 years. It's written records on many cultures, not just Asia and Chinese, let's be real, but in
Yeah.
many culture it was written, right? And we experienced it. But today it's like yoga. It's really funny. Yoga, like, fine, yoga, the word yoga is new to you, but moving your body is not new. Breathing while you're moving is not new. We did not discover this. We just renamed it something so fancy that the word physical education is now fancy. It's yoga, right? It was kind of like you know how they do it with the French, like it's not a frap, it's not a frappuccino, it's a frappuccino, And so because it's like fancier accent, it's like different. No, guys, it's the same thing, and that's why I think it's really interesting that the word quantum in the whole world of science is really silly to me because it was kind of like we can't go into spirituality because there's a giant thing called religion here, so we'll bypass it by calling it quantum. Everything in our mind is called quantum, okay?
True.
So now with religion and how praying and how you're using your mind to create a connection to this quantum mechanics, you're like, well, no, it's not spirituality, it's not religion, it's quantum science.
Or how about earlier today, Google showed me this article about these two researchers who have now found what consciousness is and have done research on it. So now we have something to actually point to instead of this like ethereal thing that we haven't really been able to like quantify. And I was like,
I'm so glad those two people found
kidding
our
me?
consciousness because it was
What?
lost. And if it wasn't for those two people, I don't know where our consciousness would be today, right? Like, really.
But
Or
people are falling for this.
well,
Banana
so
in the tailpipe.
and it's really interesting because we can have a conversation of research and what we consider credible facts in our scientific world, right? Because like, you know, this is literally a paid research about whether or not cats care. So they spent like $75,000 on a whole bunch of guys in lab coats getting cats that they probably never got cats, and they did research whether or not cats, like dogs, really care about humans. But sometimes, like, anybody who's a cat person, I'm like, yeah, I can tell you a cat doesn't care, like only when he wants to. But that's research. They chose to do that, so now they can say with a matter of fact, your cat doesn't care. But I needed a white coat and a degree of like 12 years of really hard research to tell you that a cat doesn't care. And then I think this is where we've taken science curiosity, to a place now where it's become more dogmatic to its purpose, where science was never supposed to be facts. It's actually the experience of finding things through curiosity, right? But we were given tools to make sure we're not making it up. But really, it's a way to confirm that, yes, A exists, but it doesn't mean B doesn't exist. But today's science is, if A exists, nothing else exists, only A, because I found that there's evidence that A exists. And that's the world we're living in today. We can go into many now relabeling of today's society. We can talk gender, we can talk sex, we can talk religion, but that's where we're at now. Is I think words are being used to trick us into forgetting like the simple things that we're good at. The four elements, even in astrology, when you talk about four elements, I don't have to describe to people fire is hot, and if you don't know that, go back to second
Elementary.
yeah, elementary school,
Yeah.
and touch some fire. But like, I do not need to relate that scientific term, right? So today is just so silly that people use like scientific research as facts, yet we don't know how the research came about.
And that's why I
Yeah.
really like someone like Nick, who infuses science and art, because like I teach as an art educator, art is everything. So then when you add in the scientific spin to it, it like expands it in such a more deep, profound way. And it gets people, not only does it get people interested into it, but it takes off that structural, like, oh, it's science, I don't get it, because right, that Taurus rising brings it down so that people can really like get their hands into it, right? It becomes super accessible. And I think that's really important, because the more access people have to these things that have seemed quantum and unreachable, it's like, yeah, like I'm a scientist too, right? That's why, oh man, like Mr. Wizard and like Bill Nye were so awesome, because they literally made you feel like I'm a scientist, even in the kitchen of my house, because they would bring you things or show you things that you had in your kitchen, right? And sometimes I would do experiments and stuff would happen because I didn't ask permission, but it's okay because I was exploring. And that's like the whole point and purpose of learning and educating yourself and others. Thanks.
And your namesake too, Frizzle, Tizzle,
Yes.
Miss Frizzle.
Yes!
That amazing adventures of Magic School Bus. Yeah.
And I think it's so important also the diversity of the objective scientists, right? Because like, if we are getting all dudes telling science, it's not fully holistic point of views, right? And so, what we're trying to do is everyone is an explorer, everyone is scientists. Your perspective, the more different, the better as a scientist it is, because you're going to give us, again, this Aquarian perception rather than the everybody, we've got everything labeled, so anything not labeled, we haven't discovered it yet. No, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
So
No.
real.
Yeah. Well, I love how
wanted to
you're
show-
also taking the micro world and making it realistic for us, in our senses to be able to experience it, right? Because I mean, what you see with the color gradation, you made art out of, if in science, it wouldn't look so pretty. It wouldn't look barely anything that would be recognizable, right? But being able to see it this way now, I could go, oh, that's really pretty to look at. Did you know it's a microbe? What? A microbe did that? And I think that's what I miss is the curiosity in these scientific shows, right? There's no curiosity. There's only like, I will tell you what it is. Well, sure, I'll find out what it is. Can you just make me wonder what it is at first, right?
Exactly. And even when you get told, like, that's not the end, just like you said, that's just one person's interpretation or one group of people's interpretation, that they put their stamp on it, like even the quantum physics, the whole world of quantum physics. You guys know about like David Bohm. He kind of got thrown out of quantum physics because his interpretations became much more about the mind of the world, and like he was thinking about like the implicate order and the extricate order is how I kind of described it. Like the implicate was the mind before manifesting, and then the explicate was the manifestation, and that's like kind of the arising of quantum energy, right? The kind of and it was totally rejected because there was already the Copenhagen interpretation, like when all of the quantum physicists got together in Copenhagen and said, this is quantum physics, these are the terms, these are the laws, and if you don't agree, then you're out, and that happens in a
That's
lot of
gatekeeping.
Yep.
That's super gatekeeping, and that's trying to keep something like a tradition or keep something purist, and it's like, we're not going to expand from this because this is what we've said, and we don't want anything coming in that's going to question or shift this perspective, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So speaking of bull, what would be some of the other like top like one or two challenges and woes that you have in education that you'd love for it to be adjusted to really support what we believe we're doing?
Okay. I was thinking about sharing a video about quantum physics and coherence, but I could also answer that question. So I think it actually kind of relates. There's a tendency towards busy work in education and creation of stress in education, as opposed to helping people discover their flow and their rhythm, and understanding that that's not going to be the same for everybody. So the excess of standardization as well, right? And so a lot of that comes down to, again, not viewing education as creating a space for different modes of learning, but creating a kind of like a situation where everybody has to obey the same set of rules, right?
Yeah.
So I think like now that we're in a time of greater distraction, it's in a way, it's helpful in that it's a turning point, because there's a realization that if we don't do it, if we don't change education so that people find their natural flow, then it's all just going to collapse, which it is already,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Thank you for that natural flow. And that's something that I'm really grateful that you said that, because, for myself, being an educator of future educators, they need to have an awareness, because there are so many educators who are still perpetuating that, like, you have to obey, you have to do busy work, you have to be stressed out. They're still perpetuating that this is the standard, and it's not true. It's like we're trying to go back to what we were doing pre-pandemic, and it's like, why? So I really value you bringing that up, because it's something that needs to be brought into the collective conscious awareness so that it can be shifted. Because if we don't have these conversations and we don't share these new ways of thinking, which aren't really new, it's like taking it back to the basics, but people have forgotten it because of this, like busy, work. Oh, I got to climb the ladder. Oh, the MLM system, I have to be at the top, and then like all the people at the bottom are small. Like, no. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this goes back to like us mimicking our predecessors, right? I mean, what we consider successful, right? So it's the monkey see,
Mm,
monkey do experiment of education that we're
mm,
going through, right? And because of that, like we don't see the successful, emotionally, stable people. We only see that person, that guy's going places, and you see that person stressed out. So you're like, well, okay, I guess stress is, and we see it actually in clinic all the time. A lot of people are like, um, most, and we know a lot of people's problems are really what we call the sympathetic adrenaline nervous system being activated all the time that causes all their digestion and emotional issues. But a lot of times people say that, yeah, but if I don't do that, my life will just fall apart, right? And so this goes back to, I think, the emotional complex that safety, right? And what we consider safety is sometimes dysfunctional, right? Because we have been seeing each other being dysfunctional. Yet, as we've talked about, sharing social media and TV says these people are successful, functional, regular people. So act like them. And here we are, acting like them, having none of the stuff that they're doing for real. And we're all unhappy, dysfunctional, right? And I think this is why like the idea of an overhaul is important, because we can't just have new teachers coming in to teach stuff and hopefully the kids will understand something new, because inherently those teachers haven't figured it out. I think in today's day, no teachers have figured out COVID and the post I call extra quarantine mode, right? Where you're getting super isolated now. How do you become an adult now who's emotionally stable through that and can help the next generation of kid goes, that was a generation. It's okay. Just like during war, when my parents were freaking out because people were gunning each other down on the street, it's over now. I mean, we can argue things are slightly coming back, but the idea is that, do we really believe that somebody has all the answers and is going to come in and teach us, or are we
mm.
all going to have to figure out as it happens to us, right? And so this is goes back to, again, this like, who knows all the answers? We don't. So why are we looking at people who we think have the answers, right? And
Mm.
so this is going back to this, we're modeling the wrong people per se.
Yeah, well, or even the idea of having to mimic people. I think that's kind of like we're in the Aquarian age, right? And that's the point is like finding your true self and and working from there, right? Of course, it's part of like the role playing is important, right? To discover that spectrum and theatrical kind of performance of different characters that you see in the world. But ultimately, you want to come to that center and then and shine that light through any of those characters that you're playing, but always knowing that you're coming from that central kind of channel. Um,
Have you found ways to be able to do things that maybe, in the program you were taught to do things, but you chose to do something because you felt there was a different way to connect with a student that was way better than if you had followed your obeying program or school program?
I mean, for me, a big shift happened where I was having heart issues from stress and like passed out a couple of times and like uh and and I was also starting to discover like Kundalini yoga at that time, and that was became a very important tool for me for coming to that center. It's not that I wasn't like self-aware. I've been on a process of kind of self-discovery basically my whole life, but I also bought into kind of things that were in my DNA from both sides of my family. I mean, this sort of stress drive, especially being very European, right? So there's a lot of that in the kind of um, the Italian side. There's a lot of kind of like you have to achieve, otherwise you're gonna perish. Or and then from the kind of American puritanical sort of side of like perfectionism and all of these things. So I struggle with that in my own DNA, trying to like figure out what that was and why I was carrying it, and that came to a head of me like having issues with my heart. And so the yogic practice was very very important for helping kind of sort that out and actually unravel that DNA and that epigenetics, and kind of structure some things for me. So yeah, I mean, and going through the kind of yoga teacher training, and understanding that second kind of layer of calling, where it's teaching, being a teacher is being of service to the other, all beings' higher self, right? So very much like kind of a bodhisattva vow, you know. And so I think that's um, I think I may be a little straying from the question somewhat, but it's like, yeah, that's kind of finding those practices that can help you sort the stuff that we're carrying, and a lot of it's just unconsciously controlling our lives, until you like either have experiences like I did, where your body says you can't do this anymore. You have to figure this out, um, or just kind of doing that through deep meditations, and that can also happen through uh, many different spiritual practices. But
Yeah, I mean,
people have to
so
find
so
their own.
on your end, you're really basically saying personal care is super important to be able to give back to the community of education, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that even in education, we're not really being taught. Well, we're being taught, again, role modeling like stress is what's considered successful, and we don't have any kind of way to deal with personal healing, whether it's, through breathing, through exercise, through eating, through meditation, so that's super important. Yet we don't teach that in school, right? And so it just
Yeah.
shows you like how important your health is just as important to the experience itself.
Yeah, and your ability to learn, and the things that you can learn that are already within you, right?
Right.
Mm,
Yeah.
And that
yeah.
only happens when you can pause and listen,
Yeah.
right? That's definitely one of the senses. The proprioception sense of your own kind of sense of body is one, but like the sense of that internal landscape, or your sense of your ancestors is probably another sense, right? Like,
Exactly.
Mhm.
yeah,
And that's probably why also, subconsciously we all, when we're thinking about like what are some ways that we address some of these challenges in education or in general in our lives, right? Because it really, in the end of the day, like, yes, education, but in the end of the day, life is education. You're always learning, you're always sharing, you're always growing, right? And so what we all kind of looked at is really like going back to proprioceptors and touching things. What's the first thing that we do as kids when we get to play? Our playground is the dirt, right? And so, going back to like, being grounded, and how, when we think about it, when you're stressed, people tell you like, go ground out, go put your feet on the ground, it's like, that sounds like a cheat code. Like, I don't have to study anything to be like, relaxed. No, just take your feet, take off your shoes and just ground them.
hmm
Sometimes you're like, that sounds like it's cheating, but let me try it, and you try, you're like, how come this is
Mm.
not taught? This is like a cheat code to relax.
yeah,
And so in a way, this is why we all ended up, making a fun play shop / experience around dirt, around the soil, because then that's where we get food, So this is kind of where like, we've all really developed. We've now had like 2 events where we've been trying to build a connection back to the land, right? And so we had kind of like regeneration conversation, letting people kind of play in the dirt. And so I wanted for us to reminisce some of those events. And then we have a video that we can show a little bit right before we kind of end our show. But, would you guys like to share some of the experiences of why, we wanted to do this regeneration soil events?
Mick is a water wizard and a land wizard,
Yes.
just so everyone knows. And the learning, the
Right,
tools
kind of
he
muddy.
provided, yeah, the tools he provided, just education and the gentleness with which he teaches, it makes you want to get involved. Like, I did things last Saturday that I've never done in the dirt before, and I'm 39 years old, right? And it's because there was always like this, but then it's like, Mick does it, you're like, oh my God, let's do it, yay! And it's just super fun and engaging, and it was a full body activation, right? Full sensory activation, and like such a connecting thing. And even though I didn't get to stay as long as everyone else, like before more people came, that initial groundbreaking and planting the aloe baby was, it was my first time planting something in the earth that wasn't in like in a pot, right? And just to let y'all know, like in our audience, if you've never had the opportunity to plant something in the earth that's not in a pot, please do it. Like put it on your bucket list, because breaking the soil, and then like we were discovering things in the dirt, right? It was
You
like,
get free range soil, free range soil. Oh my goodness, how lucky.
it was really cool. It was super free range soil. I can't. Like, it was a really empowering experience, and it's something where it's like, and I hate to make this reference, but it's what I think of. Like if you think of like your life and all the things you do in relation to like one of those scout badges, it's like, yeah, I now have a new patch to add to my badge because I planted something in the earth. Like, yes. You know, I feel like my my earth sash with all the things that I've done just got like another like level up. And I learned things about seeds. Like there were these seeds that didn't even look like a seed. It just looked like pieces of straw, but it's a seed. And I never knew that. What was that? Was that the yarrow?
Yeah, the yarrow. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, what? I use yarrow tincture. I use yarrow on my face. Like I use yarrow like in all these different ways, but I've never seen it in its essence to like reproduce and to like replenish itself, right? And that felt really good too, because it's like I had this thought of like, damn, I'm just taking the yarrow. I'm not even figuring out, like it's giving me all these benefits. And so with Mick showing it, it was like, oh, like this is a way to give it back. And now I know if I see yarrow growing, like I can take it and let's save it and use it and like plant it in other places. So it's really engaging and exciting.
Yes. It's so awesome to see also the kids who are there who gets to just, because what's great is like we don't really tell them that much to do, right? For the first event, we had like a little girl. We gave her buckets to fill water, and we're just showing them we just need to water some of these things, and we just let her run, and she kind of did.
She came back again. I think she was there.
Oh, she was there.
I saw.
Oh, nice.
I think wasn't that her? The same family?
It was a different family, but she had a kind of similar energy. Yeah.
Oh, dude. Okay, because her energy was exact. I was like, wow, this family came back. I thought it was her. Okay, how funny.
But just goes to show, I think, kids, again, going back to our DNA and what we know, in our remembering our DNA, I think DNA wise, like if you were given farm equipment, we would naturally just click and want to be involved in it, And I think it's our natural space. You'll see the ones who are naturally good with the water, the ones who want to dig in the dirt, right? And those are the ones who should be like digging in the dirt because they naturally have that. And it's so funny that today, like people look at the dirt. Dirt is dirty. Yeah, but is it, And this is so interesting to be able to see kind of everybody playing, like we're not coming in with like, here are the rules of how to farm or how to do anything. Like, we just come in, here are a couple of things, tools, and basically just having conversation with people, right? And that's what's really beautiful, that, you guys are just modeling what we should be doing, and people will naturally do the whole monkey see, monkey do, but the conversations we can have are really brilliant and really beautiful.
Yeah, I think the big part of it for me is it also, even really 10,000 years of agriculture have been extractive. And so we're at this amazing point in human history where we're realizing that we've actually created deserts in many places by our agricultural practices. And that's not just the modern ones. We're talking about 10,000 years of monoculture kind of based practices, especially coming from a Western kind of imperialist colonialist tradition, right? And so like now it's like, okay, there are still strongholds all over the world of people that are practicing the ancient traditional methods of intercropping, bringing many different species all together, making sure that you have like native species that thrive in that location and help pollinators. and help all the other animals and the kind of the worlds that they bring, the consciousness that they bring to that space, and making that very diverse and prolific. So diversity is health in ecosystems and also in our bodies and in our communities, right? And so, yeah, that we're in a very special moment, I think, because there's media out there, that's talking about regeneration and regenerative agriculture and all these things that science has helped us kind of rediscover the ancient stories that were told. They were told in a different way. The ancient science was told through metaphor, and now we have science using kind of like more kind of mathematics and imagery and microscopes and all that. But I think like all the old ancient myths, a lot of them were actually talking about microbes and different species interactions. Not
Yeah.
just, I mean, you took a look at the coyote or the crow and all these important animals in Native American mythology. And then if you look like at Norse mythology and all of it, there are many animals present. There are also many like beings, and I think that those are beings are actually maybe representations of the microbial world too, right? So
I mean, when you think about it,
yeah.
one of the ways that we passed on traditions and information was the oral traditions until we had the writing language, right? And so until then, actually, I believe all oral tradition were passed on were just information. Like that was our version of, school, right? Education, college, because we were learning from the people around us. And what's really interesting, the irony of colonization is that you don't take care of your resources because you don't know how to regenerate. That's why you recolonize other places, right? Because it's the same thing with our bodies, right? If we actually learn to regenerate our bodies, we would live longer. We would be immortal. But ironically, in the search for immortality, right, we separated everything and became, like a ticking time bomb, right? Rather than being regenerative and having the lifelong lifestyle. So even in our lives, we're not regenerating because we're based on consumerism. And so I think even education is very consumerish, right? Rather than like, I learned something new. Does somebody need this information? I'll just throw it in there to see who needs it, but yet like, there's so many things that we learn and we are censored for it. We're not allowed to share it, or they say, oh, you're not normalized in the bell curve of like the C range, and the A's rangers, like we already thought about everything, and it's, again, that diversity is what gives us even in agriculture, actually diversity gives us the beautiful regenerative soil, yet, monocropping. And so the idea of scientific like identification and labeling caused all these kind of inherent chaos and problems. So I think it's really important that, having a location where we can just drop people off and say, here, play with dirt, see what comes up, It's a great way, I guess, also when we talk about digging our problems out, right? Like it's metaphor, like, hey, if you have a really deep, and you could see somebody digging really deep, go, wow, some deep issues going on in that one.
Mick, what were some things that you really just felt like post the community regeneration on Saturday? Like just some thoughts you had after the experience, because you were there for the whole time.
Yeah, it was really beautiful, and there was a really good flow, like coming back to that, seeing how people kind of gravitated to whatever was like a good flow for them, like it was so, I mean, I'm surprised that you had never done that before, Tizzle, because you just flowed right into it. It was like you just knew what to do, right? And you're like nurturing that aloe and bringing it into the ground, right? So I think that's really one thing, like seeing the little girl who showed up and like she was so into taking out the daikon radish seeds and like finding them and then planting them, and those are going to help break open the earth, and seeing how people were willing to take on like some serious challenges with the earth, which is very compacted there, and like, well, you experienced it, Tizzle, like digging a hole in that earth was hard, right?
It was intense.
But
you had the tools. You had the tools, and I had to like, my fire was like, I'm gonna get this. Like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so people were like persistent, and there was nobody that was saying, "Oh, this is too hard," or whatever. It was like everybody was suggesting, "Oh,
Mm.
you could add some water to it first, and then we'll like soften it up, and then we can dig some more." And so we did that, and it made like a pool, and because the water was not going down, it was just like it's that compacted, right? And they're just like, okay, well now we're gonna like dig in this muddy pool and see how far we get down, right? Like, uh, yeah, and going back even a couple days later and seeing like the plants are doing well. It seems like they like the spot, and knowing that that's gonna start to create a little micro ecosystem. But also seeing people walk the spiral labyrinth, and seeing how you like Tizzle, you just got out there. We're like, what do we want to do? Well, we don't have a lot of time, so let's just do a spiral labyrinth. And you just like went for it. You're like with the stick, and like
It was so
suddenly
fun.
the whole thing was like drawn out. Like, okay, let's do it. Like, put
And
down
it
the
has
stones.
elements. It has rocks. It has like little glass crystals, and it has sticks.
Yeah,
So it was like using elements and things that we brought. So it's like really integrated. So cool.
and it's
Yeah.
still there. Yeah,
I'm
people
gonna go
haven't disturbed
today.
it. Ah, cool.
Feel like that's how we're going to eventually leave our markers. Like, hey, did you guys see that labyrinth being left out? Yeah, those labyrinth must have came by and like left. Like we're tattooing the earth with cool labyrinth tattoos.
Yeah,
Earth
yeah.
art, earth art.
Yeah.
Yay.
Labyrinth and plants.
Yes. Well, yes, we gotta plant this out, okay? So,
Yeah.
so that was our event on August 6th, right, in Los Angeles. So
Mhm.
our next event, we haven't confirmed it, but we're looking to do an event at the end of September. That'll be around the fall equinox. And we felt like that was a good time because we're just having conversation. And even for ourselves, like as adults, like, I don't go out to bars or drink or do any of that. So what do adults do to hang out, right? And food is another conversation. People hang out and talk and do food stuff. But like, we never really do anything that's like a daily task that is a conversation too. And so we talked about this. We're like, what if we just dig the dirt or put mulch, but while we're having a deep conversation with somebody? And that was really interesting because that's also the inner child that we're really supporting, right? Because I think the inner child allows us to kind of meet each other without any kind of judgment. And as we get older, that's when you start to look at people and go, oh, I'm not sure about that person. They might blah, 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 blah. But you're digging dirt, you're putting mulch, you're like, hey, that person can't be that bad. It might be interesting, right? And you start having conversation. Um, so it's not necessarily a dating event, but it's meant to be a social event for us, inner child that needs to come out, but still be able to meet people, but just do fun dirt stuff, right? Bringing back working on the land like it's a dating thing, right? And so we like, jokingly go, what if like the next dating thing is like, hey, let's go check out and do some soil replanting, but like meet this girl I want to meet, and
Find your soil mate.
Dude, that's amazing.
Well, are we putting that on a t-shirt for that day? Can
Yeah,
we?
yeah.
Such a
Who's
good
my
one.
soil mate?
Soil mate. Oh, right.
I love that. No, that's literally Charlie write that. Could you imagine that with the logo? Like logo, Cosmic Labyrinth logo, and then be my soil mate on the back.
Will you be my soil mate? Okay. So that's what we
It's
thought
so
about it
connecting. And
during
it's very
Libra.
mycelial. It's so
Yeah.
mycelial.
So mycelial, right? And now I'm bummed that I won't be able to be there, but it's a great way, like, just because Indy said that he might have a lot of groups who are in the, dating scene, right? Which we all know there's a ton of single divorced people out there since COVID 2020. Let's be real. Like everybody's super lonely out there. Let's ground this out. At least the conversations won't be about just getting drunk and high and fucked up and like saying stupid shit so that you feel embarrassed about hoping that night just goes away. How about intentional where we're like supporting the dirt while you're meeting random people? Like that's a great way to meeting people.
Regenerating the soil and the collective.
And the
Cosmic
collective.
Labyrinth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking to do for our next event. So everybody stay tuned. We'll give you more information about that. But with that, did anybody else have anything else to share with the group?
Get your hands in some dirt, y'all.
Yes.
It
You'll
feels
get
so
dirty.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll get dirty.
And drink your water to release that energy from your cells.
And see what you find in there that's alive too. Because the more live things you find in the dirt, that makes it soil, makes it living soil. And that's when it's going to be healthy. So look for those wriggling worms or those little bugs or ants. We found a bunch of ants a couple of days after we planted those 3 plants, all over the plants, all over the little sticks we put around them. And that's a good sign. Right? So look for those living beings. They're conscious. They're bringing, they're cycling nutrients. They're taking all the stuff that one plant didn't need anymore and turning it into treasure for all the other beings in the soil. And then it's just like a big party, right? So that event that we're going to do, we're just like, we're helping all those beings have a party while we have a party, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we already have a lot of people or a lot of beings doing the work, right? When we're not there.
I love it. I love it. Oh, thanks, y'all.
Great show. Thank you for coming on, Mick, and to sharing your experience. And also, before we end the show, 2 things I forgot. Actually, Mick, I wanted to. We are actually making NFT cards, and we're trying to make some really cool profile pictures and really go into the cryptocurrency. We've talked a little bit about games and astrology and having real world events, and really now we're really working into gamifying the entire experience. So we're really excited to bring the crypto space, the NFT into the world. And so with that, we're really excited to kind of share some really cool images of some of our cosmic labyrinthers as we make everybody their own profile picture. So Mick, we'd like to introduce you your own profile picture. So I got here, this is Mick here. And we're using the 3 elements. And so his sun sign is Scorpio. So we kind of use this 3rd eye to be like this water element. So because that personality is very much who we are internally. So we don't see a lot of that physically. He's a Taurus rising. So it's very much the earth element. So you see like what he's wearing is really like this underlying, like it's actually redwood trees that I have. I imagine the redwood trees being very much mixed energy, to be like very strong, like wood forest energy, right? That you can count on for his energy. And so you see here this earth. I'm playing around with some other ones. And then the outside here is actually your Cancer moon. And so you have this beautiful like blue aura that representing really you're like a dual water and earth sign, right? And so really I'm just trying to capture both of those elements. So I'm gonna work with the earth element a little bit more because your pink shirt really came out and it was very making it difficult for me to really trying to do this double exposure.
No, I think it works so good.
Yeah.
It's like super heart-centered.
Exactly. So this is we'd like to introduce you to this profile picture. We'll build an NFT for it, and soon you'll be in the NFT world with this cool profile picture. So we're looking to do that for all of our guests and all of our Labyrinth team member, but eventually all of our guests, so that we can have everybody join the cryptocurrency, so that we're working with technology. We're not looking to all of us just leave this world and go into technology, right? We're actually just creating a place for us to create a gamification that is maybe online, but the real world game experience is still meeting in person, touching each other, so that we're really using all of our real senses rather than our digital senses.
This is so beautiful. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, it's so beautiful. So it really does reflect an inner sense of myself. So
yes,
that's pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with that, we're just gonna play at the end of our show now. We're just gonna end it with we had a highlight reel of the first event that we had back in Los Angeles. So you guys can check it out, see kind of what some things that we do, and then stay tuned for our future events. Okay. Yeah, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Mick will see you a lot more, but I'll see everybody in 2 weeks, okay?
Peace, family. And Mick, please
Peace.
share that video, the quantum video. I really want to check that out.
Oh yeah, I'll share the link. Yeah.
Thank you, friend. I appreciate you.
The
I
regenerative
appreciate you.
summer solstice was made possible by the Citizens Committee.
We lost
There's no
audio.
audio, Charlie. Charlie, there's no audio.
You can hear any of the audio. Miss me when I'm muted. Hold on, let me do it again.
Save Elysian Park, and this was made possible by the Citizens Committee to Save Elysian Park and Terremoto. Thank you for the delicious healthiness from Morton Betty's, Raw Cane Super Juice, and Autumn's Supernatural Cookies.
I like the cookies blackness because they have lots of amazing people and they will keep it off for us and very useful coming drops. The place was full of beautiful flowers with them. And they love how they let me put cards and care for them. Everyone there was nice and kind, and I hope they inspire more kids to get in touch with nature and be more in tune with our people.
The spontaneity of our experience and really tapping into the flow. It was truly as if divine was completely on our side for everything. And all of the feedback from the participants who showed up. I'm really looking forward to more of it, so the Cosmic Labyrinth. I love y'all so much.
Water bending.
So much magic. Yeah, you're in it. You're part of the love too. Elemental art is such a beautiful surrounding. I left the event feeling kind of energetic, really invigorated and connected, and light in a lot of ways, which kind of hard to do in the last few weeks of your third trimester. So I can't wait for future events.
We ready for this? Drink some water. Thank you, gratitude, Waheguru, Shalom, Allah, Yallah, Amen, Hallelujah. Be happy and nourished and hydrated. Thank you, plants. Thank you for all the microorganisms, the fungi, all of y'all, the earthworms. Bam, Waheguru. Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Oh, so good. Peace
Yay,
all.
beautiful. Peace.
Yay.